He is considered to be one of the great presidents in the history of the United States.
Yes.
Are there ways that he failed? Is there things he could have done better?
So he failed in the ways that most great leaders fail, which is that he had a terrible succession plan. His vice president, who I spend a lot of time on in the book, Andrew Johnson, who is probably our worst president ever, Andrew Johnson had no business being anywhere near the presidency. Andrew Johnson was the only Southern senator who did not secede. And so even though he was a Democrat, Lincoln wanted to show that he was creating a unity ticket when he ran for re-election in 1864. This happens today, right? So he put someone on as vice president who he didn't even like, but who he thought was politically useful. Problem is, when Lincoln was assassinated, this guy took over. Andrew Johnson was drunk at his own inauguration. The guy was a true drunkard. He was not prepared to lead in any sense, intellectually, politically, and he was against most of the principles Lincoln was for. And the irony is that when Lincoln is assassinated in April of 1865, Andrew Johnson takes over and he has all the war powers Lincoln had. That was not good planning by Lincoln. And we can look back on it now and say, even though Lincoln is the first president who was assassinated, he should have known that there were people coming for him. It wasn't inevitable that he'd be assassinated, but he should have had a backup plan for who would take over, hopefully someone who was capable of doing the job, and Andrew Johnson was not capable.
So for me, from a personal, if I were to put myself in Lincoln's shoes or any leadership position shoes, it is difficult to think about what happens after my death, after I'm gone, right? To plan well. But at the same time, if you care about your actions to have a long-term impact, it seems like you should have a succession plan that continues on the path, continues to carry the ideals that you've implemented. So I'm unsure why people don't do that more often. Like, I wonder how much Vladimir Putin spends percentage of time per day thinking what happens after he's gone to help flourish the nation and the region that he deeply cares for. I wonder, and it's the same as for other presidents, Donald Trump, Joe Biden. They might think politically, like, how do I guarantee that it's another Democrat or a Republican? But do they think like visionary for the country? I don't know. I wonder.
I think that's very rare. And I think what I understand from the literature among business people who talk about this a lot is what ends up happening is you become so powerful, you assume you're always going to be in power. You convince yourself of that. You convince yourself that the end is far away. And of course, for Lincoln, the end could have been far away. He was healthy. He was only in his 50s. He could have lived a lot longer. But it ended fast as it could. And my understanding is that most Americans don't prepare their wills and estates. And it doesn't matter whether they're rich or poor. They assume things are just going to go on because it's not fun to think about this.
Yeah. But I feel like it's freeing. Like, you know what I did, which is interesting? Before I went to Ukraine, I recorded a video. I set up a whole thing where I record a video, like, what happens if I die? I record a video to release, and I gave my brother access to my passwords, and I gave him instructions. You're not allowed to look at this, but please publish this if I die. And that made me, it sounds silly and ridiculous, but that made me feel free to do the best thing I want to do. It's like, it's a liberating. So, like, I guess that's for your will, but also, like, do the best possible damn job you can. I feel like as a leader, having a plan, what happens if you fail, if you die, if you, or you lose some of the oomph, some of the power, some of the momentum that is driving you currently, that there's going to be a handoff where you will still be remembered as a great man or woman
But you identify one of the other problems, right? Which is one of the other reasons why someone like Lincoln or certainly Henry Kissinger doesn't create a successor, because you're afraid they're going to steal your passwords. You're afraid they're going to steal the power from you.
That's true.
You had to find someone, your brother, hopefully, who you could trust.
No. But let's just be clear. I love my brother, but he's a troll. So so there's a feature on whatever password manager I may or may not use, and there's a bunch of services like this. It's interesting. I don't know if you know about this. I've learned about all of this. Is you can have them request access, and it's going to wait 30 days before it gives them access. So it's kind of has this built-in trust, okay, trust padding. But it's interesting. I mean, to me, on that aspect, is just to have a plan in all aspects of life. This is for leadership in your private life. Like, what happens to not just your will and your wealth or whatever, but what happens to other stuff like social media and all of that
Right.
in this digital world. It's
And
fascinating.
anything you care about if you want it
Anything you care
to
about.
live on. And that's the problem. But unless you can devise a technical solution like that, you have to give someone power now.
Yeah, and that's the tricky thing. I mean, democracy is a kind of technology. You kind of have to figure out how to do it correctly, how to have that power propagate, and especially during war, how you get everybody together into this warmongering mood, and then how do you like come down from that and just relax.
Precisely.
So in some sense, that's with Andrew Johnson. That was the problem is the over centralization of power.
It was the over centralization of power, but it was also that Lincoln had a designated successor who was going to do and tried to do everything that ran against what Lincoln was doing. And it set the country back. We went forward at the end of the Civil War, and then we went backward. More so than we would have if there had been a new election. Because if there had been a new election, there still would be reason for that person running, even if they were on the other side, to try to find some compromise positions. Andrew Johnson inherited power with very few limitations on how he used that power. Congress wasn't even in session. And so this became very directly a problem because Andrew Johnson started pardoning Southerners, allowing them to come back into power.
So he had like a few months where he just went wild.
Yeah. It's giving the car keys to someone who's not prepared to drive, but decided that they're going to do what they want with the car for a while.